morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time zone you're in. Thank you for joining us for the Edison Awards third virtual roundtable of 2023. I'm Lindsay Birch, Director of Marketing and Client Engagement here at the Edison Awards, and part of my responsibilities include building a schedule for our quarterly roundtables. So if there are topics that you'd like covered, or if you have some tips and processes that you'd like to share with the Edison Award universe, I would invite you to please send them over. This community was designed to encourage collaboration and continued learning, so I'm here to help deliver the tools that you need to succeed. It's also part of my role to ensure that everyone is aware that our 2024 nomination season will be opening next week. So if you have a new product, service, or if you know someone that has new innovation, we would invite you to nominate for the 2024 Edison Awards. Winning an Edison Award absolutely sets you apart from the competition and it puts you on the map. So don't miss this opportunity to be recognized for your hard work and to put your innovation in the spotlight. Okay, so for today's roundtable, we have Carlos Rivera presenting information on building resilience against ransomware attacks. Cybersecurity is a key priority for every corporation right now, and ransomware attacks are on the rise. Carlos brings 25 years of experience in IT and cybersecurity. He's led global teams of security and network engineers, enterprise architects, risk managers, and analysts. He's been responsible for information security governance, cyber risk management, vulnerability management, application security methodology, and adaptation. And best of all, he's agreed to share some of his expertise with us today. So feel free to enter any questions or comments into the chat, and Carlos will be happy to answer those after his presentation, which should be about 30-35 minutes. And with that, I will turn it over to you, Carlos.
All right. Thank you very much, Lindsay. Appreciate it. Very happy to be here with you today. We're here to talk about ransomware resilience, something that I enjoy very much talking about. So let's dive right in. I'd like to start off and just kind of share with you a little bit of a preamble on who I am, a little bit about Infotech, the company that I work for, and then we'll just go right into talking about ransomware resilience, some metrics, the ransomware gangs that you've probably heard about, and then unavoidably we're going to touch a little bit on zero trust and maybe a little bit of generative AI, but I'm going to wait for that because I know that's top of mind for everybody. Let's just get right in there. So me, Carlos, as you know, I work for Infotech. I love designing security programs. I love vulnerability management, ransomware resilience, incident response, tabletop exercises. And lately, we've been focusing a lot on helping organizations become prepared for zero trust, to get their readiness in place. And I'll share more data in a little bit with you. We have some really good thought models that will deliver to you that I think will be really helpful as you optimize your program, or you consider specific aspects that you'd like to dive into a little bit deeper regarding zero trust. But yeah, our agenda here is to talk about assessing risks, improving the resilience, and then certainly take questions on any of the material that we've covered. If there's any questions that I haven't been able to cover for you, be glad to take that back to our practice and our colleagues and get back to you and hopefully help you out and provide something of value. So again, like I mentioned to you, this brief preamble, Infotech is a full suite research and advisory firm. We are unbiased, impartial, vendor agnostic, and Infotech believes that the biggest value to their members is really the quality of our research and the unbiased delivery of that research. And it's delivered in a couple different ways. So if you're interested in following up with Infotech and there's research that you find valuable that you'd like to pursue, you can engage on your own via do-it-yourself toolkit. You can download the research. There are guided implementations where analysts can take you through all the material. There are workshops where you can get through in a week and you can complete them effectively with your whole team. It's sometimes difficult to broker those meetings. This will make it a lot easier. And then lastly, before we dive into the material, we also offer a consulting team. If it's more hands-on, rubber meets the road type of delivery, we also have a consulting side of the firm that can help you with those endeavors. Okay, I've gone past that part. Let's start talking a little bit about ransomware resilience. Okay, here you see the beautiful equestrian statue of Marcus Aurelius in Rome. When I think about this, I think for the ancients, it was all about managing strong emotions that typically arise in a crisis, right? So, kind of on the nose with ransomware, it's a crisis, events are happening. What do? You have to be poised. You have to practice, right? So the secret of improving your ransomware resilience is, like I mentioned to you, to plan, practice, and with that practice, improve the effectiveness of your controls and execution over time. Who's involved and how they use those tools effectively. Without practicing, you're not going to be proficient. This applies to just about anything else in life, right? So, and then other things that I think about, right, when I think about ransomware and I look at this photo here, and its majestic pose here, I think about what's the likelihood of an event like this happening? Am I prepared, right? What's the potential impact if it does happen? And then if it does happen, how do those attacks progress? Do they spread? Can they be easily contained? What's their objective? What's their tactic, right? And then lastly, what can we do about it? And so in the next slide, I'm going to show you a lot of really good metrics. It came about with the Sophos. Sure, you've heard of it, the Sophos and IBM yearly reports that they publish. Let me move into that slide. And here you'll see some really good metrics here. Show you some of these numbers. 66%. That's amazing, right? The only thing that's interesting about this is that in the 2023 Sophos report, the numbers held steady, even with increasing technology, ransomware gangs being disbanded, like REvil, all the other groups that are out there. They're still being effective. They're still delivering their payloads, and it's still steady at 66% from 2022 and 2021. And so the story that I'd like to tell you here is, these numbers that you see here, this again, let me put it in context. Sophos commissioned a vendor agnostic study. They really reached out to 3,000 or so IT and cybersecurity leaders. This was carried out over 14 different countries, 15 different industries. So it was very meticulous, right? So these numbers are alarming in a way, but it also tells us what we need to do, the preparedness that needs to be in place to bolster our defenses and just keep us vigilant, right? So another thing that I wanted to mention to you when you look at these statistics, the statistics here on the left-hand side that came from Sophos and IBM, is you'll see the frequency and the impact of ransomware is increasing, right? And you can attribute that to the emerging strains. They're just more effective. They're easier to use. They can encrypt systems and destroy backups in just a couple of hours, right? We'll dive into a little bit more with the technology and how quickly it can encrypt. Double extortion, as you see here, which is more alarming now. Not only are they encrypting your data, but they're extorting you for that data. They're threatening to go public. So there are a couple different aspects here to be aware of. And then, I'd like to say that, why are these numbers going up? Well, we feel that the numbers going up is because of the ubiquity of ransomware, right? It's driven by three real factors here. It's the cyber currency, how easy it is to get payments. Ransomware as a service. I mean, anybody can tap in with very little skills and leverage a ransomware as a service provider to deliver the payloads. And then state sponsorship, right? So a lot of these ransomware gangs are finding safe harbor in their country of origin, or they're launching these attacks, and simply it's very difficult to get to them. It takes a lot of effort, right? So bottom line is that the impact on cybersecurity insurance is being obviously affected, right? Hardening conditions with cybersecurity insurance. There's a high premium cost, as I'm sure a lot of you have already experienced. And then strict underwriting, and there's very low market capacity. So this is really, as many members that I've talked to have experienced, they're feeling the impact of these attacks, the ransomware effectiveness, and it's translating to higher cybersecurity premiums. And many cybersecurity brokers not really insuring most people unless they have the right controls in place. So let me go on to the next slide and talk a little bit about what I was alluding to, right? The effectiveness of these tools, right? We talked a little bit about, R Evil and Lockbit, Lockbit 2.0, Lockbit 3.0. They're consistently improving the effectiveness of these tools. They're not sitting dormant. They're not waiting for you to get better with your defenses. They're keeping pace. As you're improving your defenses, they're improving the efficiency of their tools. So, one thing that as you look here, mean time to detect 11 days, some other statistics that, put it all front and center. What I'd like to share with you, right, is that there is no shame in becoming a target of ransomware, right? This is similar to people that ride a motorcycle. They say that there's only two people that ride motorcycles, the people that haven't fallen and the people that are about to fall, right? Or that will fall. I feel it's the same with ransomware. You have to plan as if it's going to happen. You might not know when, but you know it's coming. So you have to be prepared, like I spoke about before, right? So again, no shame in bringing this up. You have to understand the playbook that I'm going to share with you in just a second. It has three simple phases, but the objective here is to build response and recovery run books. I kind of pointed a little bit earlier to how I really love incident response. Those run books are really important, having tabletop exercises to confirm the execution of those plans. It's an important strategy that I really advise for everybody. So practice, 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 right? And obviously your backup strategy, right? You don't want to dismiss your backups. The 3-2-1 strategy, which we'll talk about in a couple of slides, is top of mind in really making you a resilient organization against these attacks. Here's a slide that I was, speaking to a little bit earlier. This is the playbook, very simply put, the three phases that you see here. And as you see here, these bad people will get in, they'll spread, and they will profit. Your job is to disrupt this playbook at any stage, getting in, spreading, or profiting. And how are you doing that? Here you can see on the bottom, your job is protecting, detecting, and then response, recovery, communications, post-incident communications, etc. But this is your plan to disrupt this playbook, right? I mentioned that I wasn't going to bring up generative AI. It's difficult today not to bring it up. A lot of people are asking me constantly, is there going to be weaponized malware with generative AI technology that's going to morph and evade detection? What I'd like to say is that, the old dogs don't need to learn any new tricks because the old tricks are still working perfectly. There's absolutely no point in investing money in a new way to con people because all the techniques seem to still be working. The statistics I shared with you earlier prove this point. These tools, whether it be phishing, vendor email compromise, business email compromise, they're finding an adequate way to deliver the payload and affect these organizations that are very much trying to be resilient, but they're trying to devise a plan like we're speaking about today. I'd like to kind of, based on what I was mentioning before about Lockbit, I'd like to tell you a little bit more about Lockbit. So just it kind of just registers how advanced this tool is that they're using to attack most organizations. So just give you a glimpse here at Lockbit 2.0, 3.0, where we're at today. The numbers are alarming, right? It can encrypt 100 gigabytes of files in under 4.5 minutes. That's amazing, right? When we look at that, that's 628, 640 gigs per hour, right? In some cases, right? Or more. And that's across the spectrum, right? So these tools are very refined. And it's not just one or two people running this outfit and these tools. These criminal gangs have HR teams, they have delivery teams, customer support. I mean, they're very structured. They're very, in many cases, very sophisticated, and they're making millions out of this. So again, Lockbit was the fastest. It was 86% faster than all the other median tools, and it's simply the fastest out there, right? We're really talking about, ballpark 25,000 files encrypted per minute. So something to be aware of, and something to keep in mind, right, as we're talking about disrupting this playbook. And the next slide will speak a little bit about, what it really means to disrupt the playbook, the way that Infotech envisions that you could do this in a consistent way, right? So this is what we feel is a good strategy, right? In building ransomware resilience. As you see here on the swim lanes, going top, left to right, assessing your resilience, we look at common attack vectors, you practice your lessons learned, you build a resilience roadmap. When I think about resilience, right, I think about resilience as less like jumping over a trampoline, and it's really more like climbing a mountain, right? It's deliberate, it takes effort, it takes time, and you have to have the right trajectory, right? So, and then we have a little bit about metrics. It's important to really measure your effectiveness, right? If you don't know how you're doing and you don't know where you're headed, you're typically not going to get to the right place. So metrics are very important, specifically when they're matched up against the playbook that we talked about a little bit earlier, those 3 phases. Your objective with metrics really is of most value is to identify what areas can be improved. So again, you can disrupt that playbook in any of those 3 phases. And I'll speak a little bit more about your defenses on the next slide. It'll show you kind of a view of in-depth, those 3 phases and elaborating a little bit more into 4 phases, right? So let me dive right into that slide. This is a really good visual. I'll let you process this for a second. But as you really look at the top here, protect, detect, respond, and recover. I think these are pretty part and parcel. Everybody knows about this. But what I really want to share with you, right, is that we looked at the 3-step playbook before, just reminding you, get in, spread, profit. The bad guys are doing this, and then how we should disrupt it at every stage, right? So this view is a different view of improving resilience by bolstering the defenses that I was talking about, right? And it really speaks to prioritizing your protection and then supporting your recovery efforts. And so, in summary, I'd like to say that deploying security controls to harden your environment and regularly testing them and validating your backup strategy is really key here, right? If you do backups and you follow 3, 2, 1, but you're not validating them, then you're missing an important piece to your business continuity plan and also a vital piece to keeping you resilient, right? You want to test the effectiveness. You want to validate recovery. You want to ensure you're as prepared as you can be for what most consider the inevitable, right? And then talking about, backup strategy, in the earlier slides, I spoke a little bit about the 3, 2, 1 strategy, which a lot of people are probably familiar with. Let me go on to that slide right here. And yeah, talking about backups. I mean, it's hard to get away from backups, even in 2023. Backups are more important than ever now, to be honest with you. And not only backups, but a good backup strategy, not just doing backups, but following this best practice that we have here, the 3, 2, 1 backup practice. This simply, it's an easy way to remember: 3 copies of data in 2 physical locations, and then 1 offsite, air-gapped, whatever you'd like to refer to that, but immutable, right? One of them that's going to be basically your gold backup. If all else goes wrong, you can recover. You have a recovery point objective that's very well defined and safeguarded. So I like to add something else. As you look through the slide and you look at the model here on the right, basically we're talking about 3, 2, 1 strategy. I'd also like to share with you, right, when we talk about, fighting disruption and exfiltration of ransomware, how can we do that, right? So how can we affect disruption? So a couple of ideas here for disruption and exfiltration, right? When I think about disruption, I think about scanning, backing up to an immutable source or destination, like we were talking about 3, 2, 1. I also think about monitoring for changes or inconsistencies that could be a risk. And then testing, validating my restores, right, which I spoke to. And then as far as exfiltration, people pulling your data out, extorting you, hurting your brand, hurting your customers. The key there is encryption at rest and encryption in transit, right? And not only do you have encryption at rest and do you have encryption in transit, how are you managing the keys? Are you safeguarding the keys with a hardware security module? Is your encryption in transit current, right? Are you using TLS 1.2? Are you using something older? These things are important if you're really looking at optimizing your resilience and your effectiveness against these attacks. And then lastly on the slide, something else that I wanted to mention is, how far do I go back with these backups, right? A lot of members ask me that, how far is far enough? And I like to think about that as, you have two choices here, right? It's your risk tolerance. And it really depends on, do you want to go back to the point of infection, or do you want to go back to where it's verified as a clean backup? You have two choices here. Again, it's based on your risk tolerance. There's no right or wrong answer here. It's all going to depend on what you feel comfortable with and what you've been able to engineer to protect yourself. And, before I move on to the next slide, we talked about, disruption, exfiltration, how far do we go back with those, recovery techniques? But also this decision is going to be heavily influenced by your cyber insurance parameters and also forensics, right? So there's still some dependencies there that you'll have to weigh. Metrics. I brought that up a couple slides ago. I absolutely feel very passionately about metrics. These could be produced by a tool. Hopefully you're not doing these manually. You have good data sources that will enrich your view, your trajectory of your journey and resilience. But here we have some examples, right? And what I'd like to show you is the examples are really broken up into the 3 phases of the playbook that I shared with you earlier. Again, if you remember, simply put, get in, spread, and profit. And then some examples, right? I'm not gonna drain this slide, but something comes to mind. I think of strategy, planning, your vision, your view of what you're doing. And I think of Miyamoto Musashi, somebody I really like to read, the Book of Five Rings, and he said something that sticks with me, right? When I think about this, right? He said, perception is strong and sight is weak. In strategy, it's important to see distant things as if they were close. So these metrics are very important, to be successful in your strategy, in your resilience journey, in your endeavor. It's important to measure how well you're doing, right? And if you're deficient in a certain area, you recalibrate, you adjust your trajectory, and you ensure that your time is well spent. You don't want to focus on applying critical patches, and month over month, what you're seeing is a 1% increase, right? There needs to be a change there, and these sort of things will help you achieve your objectives, right? Okay, lastly, if we look back, at the 3 phases that I'm bringing up here, get in, spread, profit. I think it's a good idea to start with a phased approach. Don't boil the ocean here. Pick a couple of the metrics like we were mentioning here, maybe from vulnerability management, percent of external exposures, average time to detect and security incident management, and in backup and disaster recovery, percent backup to immutable storage, right? If you haven't considered these are probably good ideas for you to refine or optimize what you currently have in place. And if you don't have anything in place, it's a good starting point to really consider some of these metrics to get you to that finish line successfully. And then so we've been talking about a lot of these concepts about ransomware resiliency. We've talked about the 3-step playbook. We've looked at a lot of useful metrics, how alarming it is, the number of people that are infected, the speed of lockbit. But I'd like to switch gears a little bit and talk to you about something very complementary. And I mentioned to you in the preamble that it's going to be hard to get away from speaking about generative AI, Chat GPT, or even zero trust, right? Probably tired of hearing about that. I'm going to do it anyways. I'm going to bring up zero trust for just a second. And wanted to show you, we have a really nice thought model that we will share with everybody after the presentation. We have a great thought model on ransomware resilience, alluding back to the playbook that I've shared with you. But this is also a great one if you've not seen this before, but perhaps you've looked at, some of the NIST special publications. I'm thinking of special publication 800-207 comes to mind, building a resilient zero trust architecture. This is a much simpler way to look at this. And the way that I look at this is you really have 5 domains in your objective to build the most resilient ransomware solution for your organization. And these are some elements of zero trust that are complementary, right? Identity, workloads and applications, network, devices, and data. And as you look at the other axis, here we have the domains, the 5 domains, but you can translate that to the protect surfaces, right? So within those, data, application, assets, and services are at risk, right? So that's just another lever for you to pull, something else for you to watch for in your journey to become resilient. And so on this slide, in summary, right, you're seeing the thought model here on the right-hand side, very convenient, but 3 principles that I hope to share with you here for this slide is you can walk away with something, think about continuous and dynamic verification. If you're doing something stale, it's probably time to reconsider another process or another tool. And then of those 3 things that I wanted to mention too, the other one is least privilege, right? Zero trust implies the principle of least privilege. If you're allowing access based on, some inherited privileges or simply because you're a member of a group, it's probably time to reconsider that. Again, translating this into ransomware resilience, always assume a breach, right? Least privilege, always assume a breach, and you want to employ continuous and dynamic verification. You can't buy zero trust. You probably already know that. I'm sure a lot of vendors would like to sell you on the idea that they do have a solution that does it all. Many of them do have a product suite that does span across multiple domains, and I'll share that with you in just a second. I'll give you a view of what some of them have to offer, in hopes that something like this can help, optimize your resilience journey. But let's move into the next slide and look at that, right? So looking at those 5 domains again, here's a different view, more simplistic view. We're looking at the identities, workloads, applications, network, devices, and data. And here are some examples. Again, I won't drain this slide. I'll let you look at this. What I'd like to tell you here is that there's no technology in the world that can fix a broken process, right? So you gotta get your house in order. You got to really start with policies, standard operating procedures, and really outline your goals, what you really want to do. And then you can pick apart what elements you'd like to pursue. So, if I look at this right, and you'll see in the next slide, there are a lot of vendors that are going to offer you dynamic, continuous authentication. That's great. They can even offer dynamic, continuous authorization, 2 access management components that I feel are very important in this field. But what if you don't know who all your users are? What if you don't know what they have access to? What if you don't know what network resources you need to protect? You're going to get limited value from the solution. Again, this goes back to technology can't fix a broken process, right? Data classification, data identification, data discovery, all these elements are complementary to the solution set, right? Let me show you the next slide. I think this will make a little bit more sense. We're talking a lot about vendors. We talked a little bit about access management, talked about continuous and dynamic authentication and authorization. Let me show you the next slide so you know what the marketplace looks like. Wow, this is amazing, right? As you look at these, now these are translated, the 5 domains that we're looking at for zero trust. Look at all the vendors in the space. I mean, it's kind of daunting when you think about it. And I know, like, for example, Zscaler will offer you a SWG, a software web gateway, a secure web gateway. They'll offer you ZTNA. They'll offer you more stuff if you like. But what I'd like to impart here is that, this is not as bad as it looks, right? There are plenty of vendors that are offering solutions for various categories here, many of them in some cases. The question that I think you need to ask yourself is, what do I really need? What problem am I trying to solve here, right? What am I trying to protect? Do I need this at this time? And I think the way that you succeed here is you have to define your own needs first, and then you have to move to the marketplace to see what fits those needs. I think of this kind of like going to a restaurant, right? If you walk in and you ask them, what should I eat? They're probably going to give you the most expensive thing on the menu. You might not even like it as much. But if you go there and you deliberately ask exactly what you feel you need and what you like, you're going to get exactly what you're asking for. Let me show you, so showed you the 5 domains, show you the 4 protect surfaces, data, assets, applications, services to protect. You'll get that in the thought model. Here's another even simpler view of this roadmap, right? I shared with you that I speak to a lot of members. We have over 35,000 members worldwide. And a lot of them are simply asking, where do we start? Where do we go about this? Can you help? Here's a very simplistic view again of the roadmap. If you start from left to right, define, design, develop, and monitor. And develop, if you're looking at the develop, if you're looking at develop here, and you're probably wondering, policies using the Kipling methodology. Kipling, simply put, is one of the pioneers of zero trust, and he developed the methodology for zero trust policy development. And simply what that policy states is it seeks to answer the who, what, when, where, and why, and how of your networking policies, right? So it really has a very systematic approach to developing those policies. And that's simply why we use the Kipling methodology. We interviewed Kipling as part of the research, and our research is based on that input. And I'd like to say, as we move on from the slide and you're kind of getting all this in summary is, remember that ransomware resilience is not just simply about identity management, vulnerabilities, or even network security as those domains would depict, right? It's also other things, right? It's about security awareness, training your users, having them become comfortable and familiar with the attack patterns that are out there, encryption, a solid backup strategy and validation strategy like we've been talking about. And then lastly, what I mentioned to you at the very beginning of our talk is practice, 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 right? It's those run books. Prioritize which run books are top of mind for you, which are the biggest risks to your organization. And then get a team together, a group of people that are representative of the security incident response team, the CERT team, and have them go through the execution of these run books in a tabletop, right? Again, practice is the best advice I can give you. That's how you can ensure your resiliency. And then here, as we come to one of our last slides here, just kind of summarizing this and bringing this all into perspective. So where do you go from here, right? You have a lot of really good information. You have a lot of data. You're going to get 2 thought models. What are next steps, right? Really, when you look at this and you look at from left to right, if we look at the resilience assessment, really, this is where you start, right? With just about everything in cybersecurity, gap analysis, right? What's my current state? And what's the target state that I'm trying to drive towards, right? What are some of my gaps that I have to build initiatives or tasks or remediation actions to close those gaps and get me to that resilient state? And so then you protect, detect, you analyze those tactics, techniques, procedures. There's a wealth of data out there like the MITRE ATT&CK framework and others that'll help equip you to be prepared for these attacks. And then you respond, recover, and then you improve, right? This should be a feedback loop of, root cause analysis. You learn from things that you were deficient in or things that you thought at the time that you plan on doing exactly the way that it played out in your mind, but perhaps it didn't play out that way in real life. And then you'll adjust your plan, you'll refine it, and next time you're going to get it right. Again, think about the trampoline analogy. This is not jumping over a trampoline. This is sort of like climbing a mountain. You make phased and incremental improvements to your plan, but being aware and doing those assessments to identify gaps and any blind spots, that's the best advice I can give you based on our research. And I think it will be very effective for you. And to close here, again, my name is Carlos Rivera from Infotech. I very much appreciate whether you're watching this live or you plan on listening or watching it to a later in a recording. Thank you for taking 40 minutes of your day to be here with us and listen to this. Very much appreciate it. Also wanted to mention that this research was created by Michelle Aber, my colleague, phenomenal person here, great analyst in our practice. If you'd like to find out more, here's our information, and you should get this as part of the deck. But thank you very much. I appreciate you spending some time with me today.
So I haven't seen any questions in the chat, but if you guys have anything you'd like to ask, now is your time. You must have done a good job because I don't see any questions. I will send this out to everybody later this week. And then if anything does come up, feel free to email me, email Carlos, and we can get you taken care of. All right.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you
Thank you
so
very
much.
much. Have a great day. Have a great week.
Take care,
Bye.
everybody.